now we get into the Johnny of it all. I have seen this third episode probably 4 or 5 times, and I just watched it right before I came here to film this. And every time I've watched it, it's hard for me to watch the Johnny portion. It just is. And so here's my whole take on Johnny. So like I said, I really thought I was setting him up for success. I felt as though I was giving him a slam dunk to come out on stage and take the title of being the most amazing, caring, sweet boyfriend. And, you know, because that was my experience with him. That was true. That was my takeaway and how I have looked at him all of these years later. And is there a world in which he probably corrupted me as well? Absolutely. But both can be true. We were very much in love. It was very sweet especially for being 14 years old. That was all very real. And again, that just sort of also plays into why I was so let down. And so right out of the gate, you know, I asked Johnny if he would say that we were in love. Again, he knows I'm asking him this question. He knows it's the first question. He's known for weeks. And instead of coming up with an answer or even just being like, yes or no, he decides to throw it back on me and ask me what I say. So immediately I'm kind of like, okay, a little thrown off. And I say, well, you know, I think for being as much in love as you can be at age 14, I would say very much so. And then it's like he goes immediately into, well, how he used to sneak into my room and immediately starts to just cut it all down to being solely about sex. And he even says, I would greet him in outfits like the one I'm wearing. And I was wearing a like little black shorts, a black bra, and this see-through shirt over it. And it's just like, you know, and I'm so thrown off. I'm really let down, and I'm shocked, quite honestly. And I'm still, you can see, I'm like, okay, yes, that is true that, yeah, Johnny, we had sex. I've never said that we didn't. Like, you took my virginity. We took each other's virginity, actually. But also, I would wake up to poems on my window and I love you and the sweetest, most romantic, some of the sweeter and more romantic things that guys have done for me in my whole life. And he kept just knocking it down to being about sex. I think, because I know myself so well, on stage, I can tell I'm visibly upset, but what I do is then I try to overcompensate and act like I really don't care. But I think you can still kind of tell. And I keep being like, yes, but this is also true. I don't know. I don't really understand the logic of, well, I do actually. I understand why he did that, and we can get to that. So I sort of think what happens is, like, even with the question of, do you think that we were in love? I think what happens is these guys, and we're going to use Johnny in particular, and I think there's a touch of talent in here too, but it's almost like Johnny is insecure about what I'm going to say, and he feels like I might say, or like if he says, yeah, I think we were in love, then I'm going to be like, are you serious? You really thought we were in love? And like make fun of him for it. So instead of just being like, yes, it's almost like these guys feel like they have to beat me to it. Which is also crazy to me because, and granted, it's been so many years, but Johnny and I had been talking for weeks leading up to it. I feel like, you know me. He even said to me at one point, it's so nice to see that you haven't changed and lost yourself in this whole world and blah, blah, blah. So I would think that you kind of know me, that I'm actually not that big of an asshole. And I think there is this misconception with, I think a lot of people do think I'm an asshole like that. Like he would get on stage and I'd be like, huh, you're an idiot. I was never in love with you. I would never, ever do that. Ever fucking do that. Kind of is with the podcast too. I feel like people sometimes come on my podcast feeling like I'm going to grill them and I'm going to go in hard. I've never done that. If you guys really do listen to the podcast, you know that. I've never done that. The only person I kind of went after was Craig, and you guys will see it because I had a reason to, but I actually could have been way harder than I was. So I just think it's interesting when guys think I'm going to be like that. I'm like, I'm actually not like that at all. I'm not trying to have a gotcha moment with Johnny. Like, I'm just trying to be like, this was my really sweet boyfriend. I've talked about him a couple times on the podcast. Like, it's actually not that deep. I'm just trying to let the audience into this little portion of my life that was pre being on TV. I also told Johnny, of course, that, like I said, I was going to bring up Lainey. And, you know, so what happened in my head on stage is he immediately is cutting everything down to just be about sex. So now I'm hurt. I'm hurt. And when I told him on the phone that I was going to like joke around and give him a hard time about Lainey and how I was the heartbreaker, well, now I'm fucking pissed. So I went in harder than I had anticipated. And I was like, you're the reason I was the heartbreaker. Cause I'm fucking mad at Johnny. And he says that I sampled Barrington. Barrington, again, is where I lived. Guys, here's what I can tell you. And I think you know by now, I am not one to hide anything. I don't shy away from being pretty fucking real about my past and what I've done and all the shit I'm not even proud of. When I moved to Laguna Beach, I had only hooked up with Johnny. And that's why, and I'm on stage and I'm going, and he's like, well, you hooked up with my best friend. I'm like, who? Say a name, because this isn't fucking true. And, this is a few months ago. I've sat on this for months now, okay? And I know I did not hook up with anybody before I moved to Laguna Beach, because I remember the first guy that I hooked up with in Laguna, a guy named Chris, and it was a big deal for me because Johnny was the only person that I hooked up with. Like, girls don't forget those things. So then, so then he says, I hooked up with his best friend. I'm like, who? Tommy. Okay, I don't know a fucking Tommy. Johnny and I had the same group of friends for years. I could sit here and list all of our friends, okay? First names and last names. And Tommy's your best friend and you and I dated for a year, but I have no recollection of who a Tommy is. I'm sorry, no. Here's what I can think of, okay? Years later, when I went back to visit my mom, a group of us went on a boat one day, and I'm pretty sure there was a guy named Tommy there then. Not 100% sure on that, but this is the only thing I can maybe gather. And we got hammered, as we used to do all the time in high school. And I kissed Tommy back at the house afterwards. And that was that. But this is this is years later. I was well into high school. So the timing on that is not accurate, Johnny, just throwing that out there. The other thing is too, we're talking about when we were kids at 14 years old. I mean, that's Camden, my oldest, will be 14 in just over a year. And, you're so young. I clearly lost my virginity at a very young age. And that was, the other thing is too, he knows what I was going through in my life at that time. And to try to like sexualize it and essentially call me a whore is wild to me. And I mean, he's a dad, and I don't know. I just felt like it was, even if it was true, because the thing is, it's not true, but even if it was true, it's so wildly inappropriate. Just talking about, the age that we were at. We're not talking about when I was 25 and an adult and, kind of had my shit together. That's debatable. But I was a 14-year-old little girl. And my other thing is, it just felt clearly so premeditated. Like he had an agenda to come out on stage and just tear me down, because he had weeks to sit on this, come up with his answers. And he told me later, I don't know if I think it was that night actually. So after the 2 shows, we actually went out to a bar. We went out to this bar, and everybody, I mean, Harry was there, a lot of my friends that you didn't actually see, the Laguna crew, Johnny fucking came, even though I didn't want him to. And maybe that night he told me, no, it was his friend. Oh my God, it was his friend that's a girl, told me that no one ever believed Johnny about me. So for 20 plus years, I don't even know how, 20 whatever years, if Johnny would say like, oh, well, Kristin Cavallari, I took her virginity, no one believed him. So to me, it felt like he had all of this anger built up after all of these years that I had nothing to do with, and he was taking it all out on me on stage. And Johnny and I did talk after the tour. I couldn't deal with that while I was on tour. But when I finally got home, I had a minute to kind of think about everything, because he had texted me. So I finally did reach out, and I was like, hey, I was upset. I am upset, and I'm not going to put what he said on blast, because again, I respect that he was and is a private person, and he didn't really, want any of this besides the fact that he agreed to come up on stage and then did what he did. But he had every excuse in the book about why he did, none of which had to do with me. It was more just, what he's going through personally. You know, I will say, I want to be careful about airing out Johnny's dirty laundry, but some of the stuff he did say as an excuse was, oh, well, you know, E-entertainment, meaning like he felt like he had to bring the drama and bring this entertainment, which is not your role. Like, again, Johnny, you don't do this stuff. So actually, you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about bringing the drama. You're the sweet ex-boyfriend. Just be yourself. And I think he was probably also intimidated by Harry, because he also said something about the conversation that Harry and I were having before he came up. And I think he just got so much in his head that it just went awry. And so essentially he was saying, because I'm going through shit in my life, I get a pass to treat you like shit. And I don't play that game.